Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin. Edinburgh morning with the smell of brewing.
Greetings, whiskey folk. Welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host as ever, Adam Bradshaw, and today we have an extra special experience for you. We have a returning guest to the show here on this wonderful Zoom tasting, Richard Urquhart, joining us all the way from Scotland, and today he's here to talk about Gordon MacPhail. Welcome back to the show, Richard.
Hi, Anne. Great to be back, and so thank you for inviting me back to come and talk about Gordon MacPhail this time.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to this because I've got a lot of experience with many different independent bottlings through my time at the Strat especially. And if there's one independent bottler who I would say I have pretty much absolute trust in, like, it's Gordon MacPhail. Like, I don't think I've ever had anything with the words Gordon and MacPhail on that has ever disappointed me, which is quite the achievement, really. Independent bottlings can be wacky, they can be wild, they can be unexpected. But to have a brand that you can really just know that whatever they put in their bottle is going to be of utmost quality is quite important these days. As you know yourself, there's a lot of new independent bottlers out there trying to prove their worth. And it's going to take a lot to take on the big boys like yourself.
I mean, for Gordon MacPhail, for us, it's quite a simple story. We were a blender that worked with distilleries throughout Speyside, but then took the step to actually bottle and release them in single malt many years before even some distilleries did it themselves. So for us, it's been a journey of discovery and exploration for single malt whiskey that's kind of spanned 4 generations now.
Amazing. So when did Gordon MacPhail actually start? And sorry, my apologies. I always seem to refer to it as Gordon MacPhail and drop the "and" for some reason. I apologize that that's incorrect.
Yeah. So we were founded in 1895 by James Gordon and John MacPhail. James Gordon was a whiskey blender and broker, and John MacPhail looked after the grocery side. So we were a similar business to, say, Chivas Brothers in Aberdeen, or some of these other kind of more well-known blenders today. But we were based in Speyside, and we would work with distilleries throughout Scotland, and we would fill their spirit. And when we decided that we wouldn't actually blend their whiskies, we would actually release them as single malt, they were quite flattered, and they actually, in the old days, gave us their labels to use. And that meant that we became a licensed bottler in some cases. So one of our kind of best-selling whiskies that we've done over the years has been our Mortlach label. So this is Mortlach, owned by Diageo, very big distillery. But we've been using this label now for over 100 years. This is the distillery's original distillery label from, I think we started using that one in 1896. So for us, it's always been around single malt whiskey. In fact, most people thought our family was quite eccentric in the early days. Why would we blend? Why would we release single malt when we could actually have blended it and sold it at a much younger age and made our money back a lot faster? But rather than thinking of my great-grandfather and my grandfather as eccentric, I think of them as pioneers. They had a belief that single malt whiskey was a great product, and maybe they're just ahead of their time. And that being said, the world has definitely started to realize that single malt whiskey is a great product. And we can see that through all the independent bottlers that have started since, and all the kind of growth of single malt whiskey being consumed around the world.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's an interesting idea that back in the day, everyone would take their own containers to the corner store and, get it filled up with whatever the local blend was. It must have been really interesting to have this one store that, instead of having their quintessential blend, had shelves stocked with all kinds of different products. It must have been quite the candy store at the time.
Yeah, and it still is today. We still have our original shop from 1895 in Elgin, so where we're based. It's still open today. So for us, it's always been, it's kind of our spiritual home. It's where we started. It's where our business work was based out of until the early 1990s, but the shop itself has remained ever since.
Can you still buy your newspaper?
No, it's very much more around the whiskey side of what we do now. But yes, I mean, for many years, it was a retail shop that sold many different things, which included our whiskies and spirits and wines.
Nice. Well, I think there's no time like the present for cracking open a whiskey. The present right now, of course, for me being about 7 o'clock in the morning, is the perfect time for a dram.
And for me, it's 3:30 on a Friday afternoon. So that's
beauty.
closer to yeah.
All right, so we're starting off with this one. And I have to say, this tube stands out on our shelf like nobody's business, because we have a separate section in our store right now for our independent bottlers. And I don't think anyone is doing a big, vibrant purple like this. Although the amount of people that see this shade of purple here in Canada and think Crown Royal is quite a lot, but this is definitely not Crown Royal.
So with our Discovery range, which this is part of, it's based around 3 flavors. So sherry matured, bourbon matured, and smoky. So we call it our Discovery range because it's a way to discover Gordon MacPhail, but it's also quite a simple way of understanding flavor profiles. So sherry matured, you can get much more kind of richness. It'll be spicier, more dried fruits. Bourbon, you'll get more vanilla, honey, and citrus. And then smoky, we'll try the smoky one later on today. And that is, as it is, it's just a smoky whiskey. So it really is a easy to understand range, Gordon MacPhail.
Yeah. And that makes sense because from a whiskey manufacturing sense, that they are the 3 easiest ways to impart like a big difference in flavor.
Yeah. So it's meant to be an easy way to educate, an easy way to try different flavors, and maybe find which flavor profile you prefer. I mean, because everyone likes different types of whiskies, and it's a nice way of finding 3 kind of base flavors that you can start to explore in more detail.
And we do have all 3 available in the market here. I forget right now what the bourbon one is, and that's a good question. Do you have multiple editions in each profile, or is all of the sherry cask from Glenrothes, or do you have more than one?
Yeah, so we have multiple ones. We don't offer them all to every market, so we tend to work in the core for certain markets. So we have a Glenrothes 11-year-old, we have a Milton Duff 10-year-old. We also do a Bunnahabhain unpeated in the sherry one as well.
Oh, cool.
In the smoky, we do a Kalila, which we're going to try later on. We do a Ledaig, and we also do a Bunnahabhain peated in there as well.
Oh, cool.
And then under the bourbon, we do a Tullamore, we do a Tomatin, we do a Glen Grant for the US market at the moment as well. So we've got a bit of variances coming through depending on which markets we're looking at. So, but it's always about that flavor profile. So it's always it always tells you which distillery it's from. It's always got an age or a vintage on there, and it should be quite a straightforward concept for whiskey drinkers. And you get some great whiskies coming through there as well. Because even though it's our Discovery range, it goes through the same quality process as any of our releases, from an 11-year-old whiskey up to the oldest whiskey we've done so far, which is the 80-year-old, which we released last year.
And it does. Everything that you've done around the packaging, I have to say, feels like it's supposed to be easy to understand for anyone who's, if you're in a store where you've not got someone who you can ask about, if you picked up and read this tube, you'd know exactly what you're in for. It's got the pictures of the cask, it's got the sherry cask matured, it says fruitcake, burnt sugars, dried fruit, rich, and then it gives which are the influences from the sherry cask, and then it gives you a much more broken down specific tasting notes for this whiskey. It's very, very well put together, and I think a fantastic idea to bring more people into the crowd.
Yeah, when we rebranded back in 2018, I think we had like 14 or 15 different ranges in our portfolio. So the portfolio was quite confusing. So we took the opportunity to streamline it and bring it down to 5 ranges. So Discovery is at the starting point into the portfolio. We then go into distillery labels, which we're going to try one later on as well, which is like the historic part of what we do. The heart is Connoisseur's Choice, which are a lot of these single cask bottlings that we do now under there. And then we go into private collection, and then we have the generations releases as the kind of the one-off special releases that we do every now and again.
Nice. Well, I'm looking forward to trying this because I have not done so yet. So have you guys found it much easier in the last couple of years bringing your stuff over to North America, since America has now changed the rules and you can have 700ml bottles there?
We're phasing that in terms of we have dry goods to use up. We have different supply agreements in some cases. So yes, it does make it easier now that we can We still have to do different labeling and different barcodes for the US market, but we can at least use the same bottle size. And the real advantage has been on the kind of really rare items where there's limited outturns. We can now offer them to the US market. Canada was always okay because you can take both bottle sizes there already. So we could actually offer some of these more unique and rare items anyway.
Yeah, nice. But that just means we don't have the advantage anymore, damn it. All right, let's try this. Oh, what a way to start the day.
So it's nice spice, some nice fruity notes. Soft on the nose.
So how long has this been in Gordon MacPhail's care, the casks that would have gone into this whiskey?
So for Gordon MacPhail, we've got slightly different to some other independent bottlers. So we don't buy mature stock. We fill our own casks at distilleries, then mature it and then release it. That doesn't make us any better or worse. It's not about saying we do something it just means that we can control our quality. So we know the casks that we filled, we know what we put into them, and we know what we have coming up in the future because of that process. And we can control the quality of every cask that we fill.
Nice.
So we work with 3 different bodegas or cooperages in Spain to buy our sherry casks. These days we do seasoning. In the old days, we'd buy sherry casks from bodegas to then bottle the sherry and then fill with spirit to mature and then release. But for us, it's very much by the quality of the cask. It means that we can get the quality of spirit, the quality of whiskey in the future. My grandfather's saying was always, a good cask makes a good whiskey. It's not rocket science, but for us, it's always about investing in the right quality of wood to make sure we get the right quality of whiskey in the future. And whiskey is an amazing industry where we get to work with liquids that were filled. A young whiskey 11 years ago. I was just starting my career at Gordon MacPhail 12 years ago. But we work with whiskies which are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. So casks filled by previous generations that we still get to work with today. And by using the right quality of cask now, the future generations of family and colleagues in the business will get to work with the spirits that we lay down today. So for us, it's always about making sure we use the best quality of wood and match it to the right distilleries to get the right profile, the right balance, so the future has the same access to as whiskey that we enjoy today.
Nice. And it also gives you the opportunity, I guess, to use the right type of wood for how long you intend that whiskey to be in it as well.
Yeah, so we adjust the maturation type or cask type depending on how long we're going to mature for or what the purpose is. So for an 11-year-old Glenrothes, we will have a set recipe that we will fill to get that balance. We may adjust the ratios to get consistency. So when we do a year's old whiskey, like an 11-year-old or a 15-year-old, we want every batch to taste the same. It's about consistency. Nice. When we do a vintage bottling, we want the style to be similar, but it doesn't need to be exactly the same as the previous vintage. And then when we do single cask bottlings, it's all about just the quality. It doesn't have to be the same as the previous cask you did. It's a unique offering that way as well. So depending on which part of the portfolio we're looking for slightly different things in terms of either consistency, but at the heart of all that, the right quality has to be there for everything that we release.
And I think one potential benefit as well to your method of buying the new spirit and maturing it yourself is I'm finding on the nose, this smells an awful lot more like an official bottling from Glenrothes than many of the indie bottlings I've had. It feels a lot more in line with their distillery character.
For us, we always we want you to taste the distillery character, and then the cask influence complements it and develops it. We don't want the cask to overpower the spirit. That's why we don't put everything in sherry casks. We put lighter spirits into bourbon. We put heavier spirits into sherry casks. On some spirits, we can do both, but then we adjust the age, the length of maturation to compensate for that. So some spirits like Kalila, for example, can work well with bourbon or sherry, or a combination of both. But again, the length of maturation, we can use that to make sure we get that balance that we're looking for.
Yeah, and it's a good point. The whole lighter, darker spirit thing, because Glenrothes is a bigger, meatier whiskey, right? I think they still use worm clubs, don't they? as far as I remember.
Yeah, I'll go with your knowledge on that one. So, and I won't try and make it up.
No, fair enough. Yeah, I'm fairly sure they are. And it does pair really, really well with the sherry casks. But a lot of independently bottled Glenrothes that I've had over the last few years feel like they've been sold to independent bottlers simply because they don't fit this distillery style. So to be able to have something that is not like an official bottling, that is a bit different, but still retains that style that you know from the official bottlings is really quite cool.
We do fill Glenrothes into some American oak as well, but typically a lot of them have been slightly older bottlings. So we've got some of our Conscious Choice upper releases just now, which are from the 80s. But that remade hogshead, so American oak, ex-bourbon, is going to give you a much more tropical flavor, but it's matured for quite a bit longer than this kind of younger whiskey.
Nice. So I just dove in and had a wee sip there. The big thing that hits me on this is it smells like it's going to be quite sort of sweet, but then on the palate, it's this beautiful sort of nutty dryness, especially on the finish that I'm getting this morning.
So with our sherry cask, we specify if we want European oak or American oak, and we use a combination of both when we get our sherry cask produced. And again, that gives us a different angle to maturation. So I get quite a bit of toffee coming through in this. So for me, it's those American oak sherry casks are coming through here a little bit as well. So you get a little bit more the spiciness from the sherry cask, but also that toffee and a little bit of kind of honey coming through there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think not only is this a great way to introduce potential new sort of consumers to the market for single malts in general, I think this is a fantastic way to open up a tasting. So yeah, Slanchavar. And this, quite incredibly, I'm just peeking at the price now. The price on the shelf, this is already available at the Strath, and the regular price is $110.35, which means that with your 10% discount that everyone watching this video will be eligible for a period of time, makes it $99.32. This is sub $100 for an 11-year-old sherry cask whiskey. That is really cool. Yeah. So if you know someone who, and I'm talking to the viewers at home right now, if you know someone who you want to really drag into the whiskey scene, a friend who you'd like to bring along to tastings and things that need a little bit of a push, buy them one of these. I think this is a great way to get the hook in.
Yeah, a very easy drinking dram to start or move to finish your day at work.
Yes, absolutely. And it's, I think this would be a really easy sort of cross recommendation for a lot of the really popular whiskies right now as well. I don't know what it's like in Scotland, but we're having quite the interesting supply chain issues here over in Canada. And there's a lot of whiskies that are usually readily available that you just absolutely can't get on the market right now. So it's interesting how we're able to fill the gaps by recommending things like this. This is going to be my go-to recommendation anytime someone comes up to me and asks for like a Macallan 12 or a Mortlock 12 for a while now, because we simply can't get them in sometimes.
I always like this range as well. So at home, small kind of whiskey selection available when people come around, and they have the discovery range where you've got those 3 distinct flavor profiles. It just gives you a very simple but effective whiskey trolley in many cases. So
yeah, if you're only going to have 3 whiskeys, make it 1 sherry, 1 bourbon, 1 peated, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's move on to the first of our big brand new releases. So we are releasing these whiskies in real time along with this video. And as such, it is time to say hello to the live chat. I hope you're all doing very well. Hopefully you've got plenty of questions for us that I'm able to type into the live chat. And if you have any questions for Richard, please do leave us a comment in the video comment section, and we'll be sure to pass them along to him. And this is quite exciting. We're not in a low gear here. We're ramping straight up. I feel like that Glenrothes was a bit of an on-ramp whiskey, and now all of a sudden we're on the highway. Yeah, all right, let's go. 1991 Bunnahabhain. What a second whiskey.
So this is our Conscious Choice range. So the Conscious Choice range was created by my grandfather in 1968. One thing I didn't mention when we talk about the history of Gordon MacPhail was that in his first week of trading, a young apprentice joined the business. He was John Urquhart, my great-grandfather. And then by 1915, he had become the sole owner of the business and been in the Urquhart family ever since. John was followed into the business by his son, George, my grandfather. And George created this range in 1968 to start to bottle whiskies where we didn't have a license to use their original distillery label. So the range itself has evolved over the years. And in 2018, we came up with this current look and feel for the range. And it's much more about information now. So we've got every little bit of detail on there, from age, vintage, cask type, cask number of bottles, tasting notes, everything anyone would want to know should be on the front of that bottle now.
Nice. There is one thing, and I'm saying this very tongue-in-cheek, there's one thing missing on the information on the front of this bottle. I recently, I can't remember which company it is, but I recently got an independently bottled whiskey on the shelf where they actually have the percentage that was lost to the angels written on the label. I'm like, I've never seen that before. What a crazy idea.
Yeah.
But it's completely meaningless to most people, of course. But yeah, this is really cool. So we've got a batch number, we've got the outturn, 204 bottles. Cool. From a refill American hogshead.
Yeah. Cask number 3078, 29 years old, and 50.2% ABV.
Nice. Very, very cool. 29 years aged.
So with Gordon MacPhail, we're privileged to have probably one of the largest, if not the largest, range of aging and aged single malt whiskey in the world. We have stock from over 100 different distilleries in our ownership, aging from the 1940s up to cask we filled earlier this year. So there's a massive range of different future releases waiting to come out of that warehouse.
Nice. I'm very intrigued to try this. It's nearly 3 decades, but it's still managed to retain 50 ABV, which is quite nice. The tasting notes, it feels like I'm about to flip a coin, because the tasting notes that are written on here, they're all kinds of fun things: orange peel, roasted coffee beans, cracked black pepper, and it does say subtle smoke. So I'm wondering if this is one of Bunnahabhain's, unpeated / incredibly lightly peated whiskies from the get-go, or whether this is something that was originally quite peated, but after 29 years has, of course, dissipated, as Bunnahabhains do. So I'm looking forward to investigating. Nice. Love the corks.
For me, it's the grapefruit of the nose straight away. You're starting to get that kind of more tropical flavors from that American oak after almost 3 decades.
Yeah, it feels like someone's charred a grapefruit for a cocktail. They've just put a little blowtorch on it. They've given it the twist to release all the citric acid, and then just charred it slightly.
Bit of pineapple in there as well for me. Is that kind of...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. On a skewer. The skewer is very important.
Maybe a little bit of charred oak there. I'm not going to say it's too smoky at this stage, and the nose is...
No, I wouldn't say. Yeah, I'm not certainly getting charred oak necessarily. I mean, I'm getting the charred fruit slightly, but I am getting some kind of wood. I'm getting some cloves, I think, on the nose. And
then it's just creamy on the palate, very smooth.
Wow. But oh, so much flavor. And there is just that little hint of smoke on the finish. It's really not there until until it's almost left your mouth or until it after. And that is, but then it lingers for quite a while. Ooh. In the best way possible, it tastes like I had a cigar a couple of hours ago.
Yeah. I've never had a cigar, so I'll take your word for it.
We're a lot closer to Cuba.
But for 50% ABV, it's very soft. I'm not getting any kind of burn coming through there as well, because it is cask strength.
Yeah.
It seems very, very balanced.
No, you're absolutely right. It's very, very soft in terms of the alcohol burn, but incredibly full flavor. It's such a dense parcel of flavor for me. Every single sip feels like I've taken 20. It's like a coffee flavored cheesecake.
Yeah, I can go with that. Power of suggestion.
It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. Those dark, rich notes are really interesting counterbalance with the tropical notes, which are very much there on the nose, but I would say less present on the palate. But if you go searching for them, they are still there.
One of the biggest changes with the portfolio kind of change in 2018 was to move Conscious Choice from being batch releases to be predominantly single casks. That's been, I think, a good move for our portfolio, because now we have all these kind of lots of unique releases that come out, and once they're gone, they're gone. So 204 bottles of this one. Once it's gone, it's gone. There'll never be another cask exactly the same as this.
Absolutely.
It's quite nice.
And it's also good for retailers like us, because it means that we get to say things like, this is exclusively available at the Strath in BC, which it is. This was brought in. There was only one case brought into the profits, and the original plan was to release it at the pop-up store at the Victoria Whisky Festival, which unfortunately, of course, didn't happen again this year. So whilst I'm sad that the festival didn't happen and I didn't get to see you in person, I'm very grateful that we're putting this tasting together. So thank you for giving me an excuse to drink this whiskey.
Well, thank you. I'm gonna drink it as well. That's it. For me, this is the great thing about Gordon MacPhail. There's just so many different whiskies that we release every year that you just get to try. You can always be surprised because you've tried something that you've not tried before, and it's always just a different experience.
Yeah. And this is a particularly interesting example of a Bunnahabhain to me, because it's not necessarily what you would expect from an older Bunnahabhain, because the majority of older ones that I've had have been official bottlings, and they've been much more sherry influenced. This feels so much more, I don't know, it's got more of a sense of self. I feel, as much as I love the official bottlings of Bunnahabhain 25, for example, it does start to get a little lost in the wood. But this feels much more, much sort of stronger, a much better sense of identity.
So for Gordon MacPhail, it's never about competing with official bottlings from distilleries. We rely on working with distilleries to get unique spirit. So for us, it's always about complementing what distilleries offer. So we tend to not do the exact same releases that distilleries do themselves. But we either do a different age, vintage, or different maturation. But as a part of our kind of what we're trying to achieve with our releases is always about matching spirit, oak, and time. So for us, if we use American oak and mature for a bit longer, we still want you to taste the DNA of the distillery. So in this case, Bunnahabhain, but then get the nice balance and the nice flavor profile coming from the oak as well. And that's just why I think, for me, some of these remade hogsheads that we still have in our portfolio, this kind of 30-year-old mark, I just really love that kind of tropical flavor profile in the nose, that softness, that sweetness. It just becomes a very, for me, for my palate, just a really enjoyable experience.
Yeah, and I think what you said there really rings true. This feels like it is complementary to their own range. because they don't really do anything like this. If you want this experience, you have to come to Gordon MacPhail. And I think that's a great move. And this is an absolutely fantastic whiskey.
With ourselves, because we're working on a long-term plan, effectively, that's multi-generational, we always make sure we put more whiskey back in or more spirit back in than we take out. And we always want to make sure the future has a great range of whiskey as well. So for us, it's always about, we're not trying to use too much stock too soon. It's all about even balancing our portfolio to make sure that we responsibly manage what we have, reinvest back into the stocks we have to make sure that we can offer these types of whiskies in the future.
Nice. And that actually leads perfectly into my next question, because, you know, if you look at the year on this was filled in 1991, which, to the best of my recollection, I was very young at the time, but so I don't remember this. But from what I've been told, that wasn't a particularly great period for the whiskey industry. That was taking a bit of a downturn internationally. So do you see in your stocks that during those downturns you have slightly less whiskey, or do you take advantage of those downturns because you guys know that it will bounce back again?
So we continued to invest even through the downturns. What we did see was maybe when distilleries closed down, we obviously lost fillings because we couldn't fill them anymore.
Of course.
But we look at the way the portfolio has changed. It changes every decade because the world has changed at those times as well. Mm-hmm. So today, we don't fill as many distilleries as we did 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. But that may change again in the future. We don't know that yet. That's why, as a business, we have our distillery. So Benwick, which we talked about last time, and our new distillery, we want to make sure that our business, Gordon MacPhail, still has access to spirit, no matter what happens in the future. So by having two of our own distilleries now as well, and Gordon MacPhail doing its independent bottlings, we feel it's a nice place to be in terms of making sure we can offer the whiskey in the future.
Mm-hmm. And persuading distilleries to part with their new make spirit, I'm sure, can be quite contentious, because a lot of them, want to hold on to as much spirit as they can for their own purposes, but B, I think a lot of distilleries probably want to be more involved in the maturation of their own whiskey. Do you ever have issues? I mean, it's probably been a long time since you guys have actually approached a new distillery to buy the new make spirit, has it?
I think my twin brother, who's in the business, who's our operations director, he's heavily involved in that side. And we have filled some casks at some of the newer distilleries. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is based on kind of our reputation, but also our relationships with distillery partners throughout Scotland. But the world is changing. It is not as easy as it was 50 years ago, because demand for single malt is higher. Brands are also focused on their own brands, whereas maybe 50 years ago it was different. So for us, it's just more, if we keep making great quality products, making sure the whiskey is the right quality when we release it, everything like that, and we will keep working with distilleries as long as we can.
I think it would be absolutely impossible, really, for anyone else to come in now and do what you guys are doing. You've been grandfathered into this process, basically.
I think it's the time it takes to get into the whiskey industry is always the big barrier. You want to fill casks, okay, invest, wait 10, 15, 20 years, and then you've got something to sell. We're very lucky that we're 4 generations in, and the hard work was probably done in the early days to build up a portfolio that we now just top up every year.
Absolutely. But I think even if some crazy trillionaire came in, if Elon Musk came in and decided that he wanted to start an independent bottler, I don't think, even with all the money in the world, I don't think you can buy the relationships that Gordon MacPhail has developed throughout the years.
No, but there's a lot of great independent bottlings released from other companies, and they'll be buying mature whiskey maybe, or through brokers.
Exactly. But I'm specifically meaning the buying of the new make spirit. Yeah. I imagine that would be very, very difficult for a lot of distilleries, for a lot of independent bottlers, I mean. Although, then again, I mean, especially with newer distilleries, I'm sure they're probably very grateful for people buying their new make. I mean, I'm sure, like Aaron back in the day probably sold an awful lot of new make when they first started.
Yeah, I think sometimes distilleries have to make decisions about cash flow. They have different pressures on them. Yeah, I think if you try to knock on doors today to get new fillings, you get a very different response to what we had 100 years ago.
Mm.
And we enjoy a very privileged position due to our history and our relationships with distillers throughout Scotland. And that's allowed us to continue to invest in new spirits to make future products. Which, yeah, it's a privilege.
And it's an interesting thing as well. I don't know if you've noticed this, but you'll often see all of a sudden, like half a dozen different independent bottlers releasing somewhat similar whiskies when a parcel of whiskey is opened up to the market. You'll all of a sudden see like, this year everyone released an 8-year-old Tormore or something, which is kind of interesting. But of course, being that you have a completely different way of getting your whiskies and producing your whiskies, you're never part of that, right? Which always means that you have a more different and unique lineup.
But we also can plan what we will have next year, the year after.
Mm-hmm.
And a great example is if we take Mortlach again, because the one that's in front of me just now, we fill cask every year, destined to be a 15-year-old, destined to be a 25-year-old, destined to be older vintages. So if we stop filling that Mortlach, it'd be 15 years before we stop selling a 15-year-old, because we've been filling stock to be a 15-year-old every year.
Nice.
It'll be 25 years before we stop selling a 25-year-old. It will be...
So we're at least 25 years away from you guys not having a 25-year-old.
Yeah, but we still fill Mortlach every year, so we're so it's still that countdown time started. But some of the other distilleries in our portfolio, like Glenlivet, for example, we used to do a 15-year-old. We used to do different ages, and now what we do is vintages because we don't have any way of replacing that stock. So we just allow it to get older and release a few casks across the portfolio. Nice. That being said, you're an 80-year-old Glenlivet, so you can see how long we have been working with that. We'll have the depth to do a young whiskey, but also an 80-year-old whiskey as well.
Yeah, that's a time-tested relationship there. So, yeah, Connoisseur's Choice, 29 years aged, 1991 Bunnahabhain. We have 5 bottles available to purchase, and those 5 bottles are available right now at strathclicker.com, exclusively at the Strathale Wine and Spirit Merchants here in BC. Regular price $573.83, which means with 10% off, it's down to $516.45.
And there's no more of this back in Scotland, so it's probably in the world.
We're often the last place to get whiskies, and that's a blessing and a curse.
So when you will see our batch number in these releases, the first 2 digits, so 21, tells you the year that we released it. So this is a 2021 release.
Mm-hmm. 21/34. Cool.
It was the 34th bottling of 2021.
Nice. And is that bottling in general or bottling of Bunnahabhain?
In general. So each cask will be ordered and be given a sequential number. And it tends to be the ones we bottle first, you get lower numbers. And then as we get later in the year, you get the higher numbers.
So if you really wanted to, you could try and collect all of the ones released in a year.
It'll be very difficult because a lot of these are single casks. They are market exclusives. They're regional exclusives. There's very few of them that would actually be offered to every market. So it would still be very impressive because you'd have to fly around the world a few times to pick up all these bottles.
There's a few international brand ambassadors that might be able to do that.
Yeah.
How many editions would you generally do in a year? I mean, you've only had this brand as it currently stands for a couple of years, right? Since the rebrand?
Yeah, 2018. So we maybe do about 150, maybe close to 200 releases a year.
Nice.
Under Connoisseur's Choice.
Awesome. Well, I think that on that, we should discover another one of the 5 pillars of Gordon MacPhail. And this is actually the only whiskey in this entire lineup that I've had before, and I absolutely love it. And this is an example of your distillery labels. And that is such a classic throwback design label. I've had many people have a love-hate relationship with this label. It's certainly of an era.
So we've got two types of distillery labels. We've got ones that are from like the 1890s, the more like the Linkwoods, the Glenlivets. And then we've got the younger labels from the 1990s, which are like the Ardmore, the Scapa, our Old Moor and Duff label, Glen Talkers. And we were given permission to create labels. I mean, that's only what coming up for 30 years ago, really, to actually create our own labels for another company's distilleries. So the Ardmore isn't a 100-year-old label, it's only a 30-year-old label, where it's almost still, again, testament to our relationships that we were allowed to create those labels and still use them today.
Absolutely. And this is something that I learned, I guess, whether it's correct or incorrect, that I was wondering if you had any insight on, because there's a bit of a whiskey myth, if you will, that there is a rule that independent bottlers have to have their own name or logo bigger than the distilleries. And of course, your distillery labels buck that trend because you've got massive Ardmore right across there. But I'm assuming, seeing as you have special permission to use the brand, that if that rule does exist, that you're kind of exempt from it.
Yeah, so the rules have kind of changed, I guess, over the last couple of years. And on all our Conscious Choice labels, yes, there's a certain ratio of how labels have to be named for that very reason. With that, distillery labels, it's a little bit different. But on the newer bottlings, Gordon MacPhail now is much more prominent on the label as well.
Oh, cool.
But that being said, more like it's still bigger in that example. So yeah, it's kind of right that the brand has to be bigger. But the distillery labels one, the brand is the original distillery. So that's still allowed.
Nice.
But we couldn't do this choice with the distillery being bigger than Gordon MacPhail because we don't have. That's a different label, and that would be very much than what you were just talking about the independent bottle name being bigger.
Yeah, and yeah, you don't have the relationship with all of the distilleries, only some of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of them are historic. These days, all new distilleries would probably go into Conscious Choice or Discovery, and distillery labels over the next 20 years may fade away as relationships and people change at those companies.
So one thing I love on here is that, like, not only do you have the brand name and this classic, cool, retro design, but it even has underneath the word Ardmore, trademark of proprietors WM Teachers and Sons Limited, which I don't know if that company exists anymore because it's Beam Suntory now, isn't it? But I guess it's probably a subsidiary. But I think that is really cool as well, and it really shows how much of a relationship you have with the companies you work with.
Yeah, these are meant to be the original labels from that distillery, so they've all been based on how they were bottled. Much more so with like the Mortlake and Linkwood labels, where the Mortlake one has proprietors George Cowie and Sons Limited. It's very much going back to those older times and the original proprietors, effectively.
Nice. All right. Let's open up a fresh bottle of this bad boy. I absolutely adore this whiskey. I have one right there. And actually, knowing when I bought that whiskey and when this one landed on the shelf, is possibly the same batch.
So this is a pre-2018 batch because the logo isn't on the front of the bottle, but it would still be very much the same flavor profile as what we do for all our Ardmores. Mm-hmm. We're on to Ardmore 2002 now. So we do one vintage every year.
Nice. So one of the things that I love about this whiskey from a geeky perspective is the fact that because it was distilled in 1998, it means that this was actually made in the old school coal-fired stills before they had to change them.
For me, I just love that little bit of smokiness you get coming through in the spirit here. And we've been tied into that kind of older still, and the way they heated the stills and everything would have just added to that kind of little bit of oiliness, a little bit of smokiness.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of peat, especially when it sort of plays a part in a bigger picture. And I think we talked about this with Ben Romack, actually. And actually, I feel like when we talked about Ben Romack in our last video, that I made a connection to Ardmore, because this is one of my favorite distilleries. And I think there is an awful lot of similarity between the two.
Yeah, I mean, Bedrock is obviously one of my favorite whiskies.
Of course.
Ardmore's I really enjoy as well. Typically, we have a little bit older Ardmore in terms of like 20 plus year old. Typically, you just sherry matured these days. There's been a mixture of bourbon and sherry, but still more towards the sherry side. But you just get a really nice kind of richness, subtle smokiness. The smokiness isn't overpowering the whiskey at all. And you just get, a really balanced, but that smokiness just adds an extra layer to it.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I was a fan before, but since we did that Benroma tasting, I absolutely have loved drinking Benroma for the last few months. It has, I have gone through, I think, 3 bottles of the 15-year-old.
I think I saw that spike in depletions coming through.
Yeah, it's a really lovely sort of red fruit creamed smoky thing. It's like clotted cream and raspberry jam that you put on a scone, but that has somehow been imbued with smoke. It's a smoky raspberry jam on top of clotted cream.
Just you get all those kind of dry spice, dry fruits and spiciness coming through there.
Yeah, that is gorgeous. There's a nice sort of bitter note that plays a nice counterbalance to the sweet fruits as well. That is reminding me right now of nettle soup, which is something I've not had in a good couple of decades, I don't think. But yeah, it's got that sort of nice bitter herbaceous creaminess to it as well.
There's one change to our distillery range that came in during lockdown last year. We increased the ABV from 43 to 46%. So one majority 43. So all the new labels that we'll bring out will be 46%.
Nice.
So that means all our whiskies are natural color across the whole portfolio, across the whole company. But some of our whiskies are 43. They're chill filtered, not down to any negative temperatures, down to about 4 or 5 degrees. But when it goes to 46, we just go non-chill filtered. So, and that's been it's been received very positively about that change. So it's just you'll see that change coming through in future releases.
Amazing. I will make sure to keep at least a quarter bottle of my bottle of this so that I can do a comparison when the next one comes in. James put us down on the list, and also thank you for setting this up. So this has been a while now since it was released. It was bottled in 2016, so it's been 6 years in the opening. Which, by the way, the fact that the cork is so incredibly well intact still after 6 years sitting on a shelf is well done, guys. You've got good cork, people.
But the style of this one is just very much the same as the future releases. It's just moving forward to vintage. What we're looking for here is consistency in that kind of sherried, a little bit of smokiness. And the vintage is just, everyone will be a little bit different, but it's just, it'll be relatively similar.
Nice. And I have to say, like, even at 43%, this is still incredibly full flavored. It doesn't feel reduced at all. It feels like the ABV was brought down, but it doesn't feel like the flavor has. So at 46, it's going to be even more.
Yeah. We've done a number of Ardmore single casks over the last few years, kind of in the early 2000s, and they've been incredibly rich. Smokiness comes to the forefront as well. So Ardmore is definitely a distillery which I think works well at the 43%, 46%, but also single cask as well.
And as we were saying with the last whiskey about trying to make releases that the official bottlings don't really have, so you can complement their range rather than contest with it. I mean, at least right now, like, I don't think Ardmore does anything even with an age statement in Canada. I don't think they do anything in the UK anymore either. I was actually looking on Whiskey Exchange and Master of Malt yesterday, so I can see if I can get some whiskey sent to my parents that I can't get over here for when I visit in May, so I can pick it up. And I was trying to find, because I know that a while ago they had, I think it was a 23-year-old or a 19-year-old or something, some weird number, official bottling 3 or 4 years ago. But that seems to have disappeared off the shelves now. So if you want something that is Ardmore that feels like an Ardmore from this age, this is really the only choice.
So with going for every whiskey we do, either has a vintage or a bottling date or a years old statement. So for us, it's easier for us just to make sure that we tell you the vintage or tell you the age of some of the discovery products. And it just means you can get something a little bit different as well. But in terms of the other releases, I used to get to travel the world, get to see whiskey shops all around the world and see what other companies were doing. It's very hard to see that when you're stuck at home and you can't actually go out and see people and see what's happening in the world.
Of course.
I'm looking forward to coming to Canada in a month's time to just get back into the market and see what's happening and see what everybody's doing.
Yeah. And I don't know if you have any plans to come to Victoria, but if you do, then hit me up for a dram. I've got a couple of good ones to share.
James, I think we can fit that into the itinerary when you're listening to this.
And well, I mean, I have secretly revealed this in a couple of places now, and I did do a few sort of cheeky hints. But whilst we're here and whilst we're talking about future projects, we do have a single cask Benromach. I think it's on the water on its way to us right now. Yeah.
Again, thank you very much for that. I'm looking forward to
it.
We've seen a massive increase in interest in Benromach in Canada through the whole country in the last 12 months. It's been amazing to see. So thank you so much for supporting that side. But with Gordon MacPhail as well, it's been a really successful 12 months for us with Authentic, our agents, but also getting a different range of product into the market. And we see that in BC. We've never had as much product in BC than we do right now.
Amazing. And I am really, really grateful to see all of these additions making it out to us, because I often feel like BC gets a little left out of some of these very special whiskies. So it's nice to feel included. But also on that, we're being recorded, and if you'd like this struck from the record, it can be. But I'm going to ask you right now. I'm going to put you on the spotlight. Can we start looking into getting our own cask of something from Gordon MacPhail for our 20th anniversary next year? Absolutely. Amazing.
There's much detail about what you're exactly looking for in terms of, I'm guessing it's 20th anniversary, you want a 20-year-old. So any specific months or that year?
I mean, if that's possible, absolutely. And would be cool.
Yeah, we can definitely. So it'd be 2003. Yeah, is that the vintage you'd be looking for?
That would be the one. Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually looking at the products for this year. I think we've got 6 or 7 Ardmore 2003 casks, all available for the market. So for the world. So I'm sure we can find something that would be. We can definitely have a chat. It'd be quite fun as well. Get some samples. We can sit down, try them all, and then you can pick the one which you think is the best for your. Yeah.
Hey, yeah, we could do that on video. So no promises, viewers, but maybe you've just seen the spark of something very special here. Lovely. So this has been available for a while, and as far as I'm aware, there's no more of this edition of the Distillery Labels Ardmore in the warehouse. But I'm very much looking forward to the next edition with the new gold emblem and the 46% non-chill filter. But if you want to pick up one of the last, I think, 2 remaining bottles right now of this edition, it is available regular price $204.26, and the sale price then makes it $183.83, which that's about $10 a year. Good stuff.
It's a very nice whiskey.
That is an absolutely beautiful whiskey, and is this something that you guys have continued to have stock for? You're still filling casks with?
not 100% sure if we still are, but we still have good stocks. But it's that's the thing with the Gordon MacPhail portfolio. We because we fill new make, we don't see if something changes, we don't see the changes for 10, 15 years. So it's in some cases it's hard for me to go exactly fill that this year because I'm only working with stuff that's was filled 15 years ago or 10 years ago. So it's
actually, especially with Ardmore, because they did make that change from coal-fired to direct-fired stills. So maybe with that change in their manufacturing, you might find that the spirit has changed enough that you want to change the age statement that you put these Ardmores out at. You might find later on that it needs more or less time in the cask, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it does seem to be around about a 20-year mark is what we're, or high teens, kind of 20 years old is where we tend to release them. And these days it tends to be sherry casks. So we get this really nice balance, this richness that we're looking for. And it's just this great balanced whiskey.
Nice. All right. Well, I am very, very excited about the next whiskey because we're about to go back to back with one of my favorite distilleries of all time. We have another Ardmore, which I am giddy with delight at because this, funnily enough, is also a 1998 Ardmore, potentially from the same sort of not exact distillate, but very similar distillate to the last. But this one has been given the single cask treatment and aged for 22 years.
So this is a single cask bottling, 223 bottles. Bottle at cask strength, but yeah, same vintage as the distillery label, but a one-off unique offering.
Amazing. And this is a refill American hogshead as well, so it should be a quite different experience, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so we're going to see what we saw with the Bunnahabhain, that tropical flavor profile, more kind of pineapple, maybe some apricot coming through. Nice. Smokiness will still be there, but it will just be less, it won't be as rich, but it'll just be a different type of sweetness coming through.
And now that I'm learning how to decode these labels a little bit, I'm noticing that this was bottled on January 26th, 2021. And by January 26th, you'd already managed to do 44 different editions.
Roughly, yeah.
Amazing. All right. Very, very, very much looking forward to this one. That, I have to say, is much more familiar Ardmore to me on the nose. And that's because the vast majority of Ardmore that I personally have experience with has been bourbon cask. So this one feels a lot more familiar. Not that I necessarily like or dislike bourbon cask over sherry cask more, but I've definitely had more of this. And on the nose, that is this beautiful, beautiful, slightly salted cured meat, like a prosciutto or something. Outstanding. So this is 55.5% ABV.
It's kind of, when you get into the slightly older American oak, I really love that kind of grapefruit, kind of flavor profile coming through the pineapple. It just, it's just one of my favorite types of whiskey.
Yeah. Oh, this is, of all of the Connoisseur's Choice range that we have that we're releasing today here, we have one case of everything, apart from this, which we have two cases of, which I'm very, very grateful for, because it means I can guilt-free buy myself a bottle without worrying that I'm going to reduce the amount available for my customers.
These refill American hogsheads, we've had two of today. These type of casks we won't have in the future, because they go back to a time when we used to buy bourbon casks, but they come broken down onto pallets into the UK, into Scotland, and then were remade in Scotland. So they're made big. So still ex-bourbon casks, but remade into our hogshead, so 250-liter size. So these casks will phase away, if it will fade out over time, because we only ever use our cask maximum twice. We don't have any first fill remade hogsheads coming in anymore. So we just use bourbon casks there, but they get shipped intact now. So a different bottling to what we just tried, cask strength, but that different flavor profile. You can still taste that DNA of Ardmore though, so that little bit of smokiness that's there. But rather than that sweetness and that kind of sherry influence, we're just getting much more of that tropical fruits. But for me, the key thing about the 2 releases, you can still taste it's Ardmore. It's very distinctive that way.
Absolutely. It's got that sort of softer wood smoke thing going for it. And I think citrus as well seems to be a bit of a calling card for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, big fan of this one.
So the other thing about Gordon MacPhail and when we do our releases, every cask that we filled typically has been destined to be single malt, which means that we've always looked for it to be able to stand up by itself. It's never been about trying to have casks that we can blend together and maybe one gets lost in there. So for us, every cask that we fill should always be the right level of quality that we can do single cask bottlings, or we can do batch releases and not have to worry about anything being not up to the right standard.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I feel this is quite interesting because this is a good 4 years longer aged than the last Ardmore. But it feels smokier somehow. I wonder if the bourbon casks managed to retain the smoke level a little more.
Yeah, I mean, we do this with Benoric that when we did our heavy peated peat smoke, we do a bourbon matured peat smoke now and a sherry matured. But we did bourbon cask first because it's a lighter cask type. It didn't mask any of the smokiness. With that heavier sherry cask, European oak, American oak, but that sherry cask would actually give you much less smoke because the cask would actually start to hide some of that smokiness in the whiskey. So yes, this being American oak, I'd expect it to be smokier because the cask just isn't as heavy or as much influence as a sherry cask.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, there are 11 bottles of this currently available at the Strath. It's launching right this second. $317.30 is the full price, which means with 10% off, it is $285.57. $285.57 for a 22-year-old single cask strength Ardmore from Gordon MacPhail. I say there's 11 available. Realistically, there's 10. Unless you guys manage to buy them all out before the end of this video, because I probably won't have time to go and buy my own. But then again, I could probably buy it before. We'll see what happens. Lovely. Well, we're going now to set sail somewhat. We're heading off of the mainland and heading to the islands. One very specific island. A wonderful island where if you've spent any time around young people in the UK, you will probably know as the home of Balamory. However, if you are a whiskey drinker in Canada, you probably know much better as the home of Tobermory and their peated expression, Lachey. And this is very exciting because we have a history of loving this distillery here at the Dram Association. Until very recently, the highest rated bottle by any of our members was a 19-year-old Lachey. And this is also a 19-year-old Lachey. So I have very high hopes for this, especially as the last one was also, I believe, a bourbon cask. So this is going to be quite a different experience.
Yeah, the color of that whiskey is amazing.
It really is, isn't it? It looks like bonfire toffee almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is from February 2021, batch 54, 533 bottles, of course, because it is from a refill sherry butt. That is a much bigger size. Probably, color-wise, one of the most active refill sherry butts I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the color, it'll be European oak, much darker, much richer. So with our wood policy, I can mention it briefly that we never use our cask twice. So that cask may have been used for 10 years, and then this is the second fill. But then after that, we won't have used it again. It will be sold back to our local cooperage to rejuvenate and sell to another company.
Yeah, that's true. There's no such thing as as something on here that will be called a second fill cask. It's first fill and then refill.
Yeah. So no third fills. That means we can get that richness that we're looking for. So nice. When we look at casks, it's not just about the number of fills; it's about the lifespan.
Mm-hmm. And that explains the color a lot as well, because I think the vast majority of independent bottlers would refer to a refill cask as something that's been 3, 4, 5 times used, when this is only second.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of flavor still going to come from that. 56.8 ABV. Nice strong one from 19 years. Oh, yeah. All right.
One of the great examples of our kind of wood policy would be if I go to the 8-year-old, that was a first fill cask. So we didn't use that cask again because after 80 years, the usable life of that cask has been exhausted. The cask had done all its hard work. There's nothing else to come out of that cask. So we wouldn't just use that cask again. So we look at how long the cask has been used for, not necessarily number of fills, but we only ever use a cask maximum twice is the kind of broad framework that we have for Gordon MacPhail. And that means we can get different flavor profiles because every cask is more active or less active than each other. And we can use that to make sure we get that balance we're looking for.
Please tell me, though, that cask was used for something cool and wasn't just, used for firewood.
No, we made some nice cask end pictures. And when we auctioned off the first one for charity, you got one of the ends. The other end is in our shop. And then the stage we used to make little acorns as a memento for everyone who came to a generations tasting to have something that was so the acorn represented the oak, obviously, and you got something to take away as a little memento of that cask.
Nice. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. We
did cufflinks, which were quite cool as well.
Oh, neat. So when we buy an Ardmore cask from you guys, we're going to have to make sure it was a refill cask so that we can get some of the wood too. I don't know if you can just send a raw stave across, but that probably wouldn't pass customs, would it?
I'll see what I can put in my case.
All righty, here we go. Beautiful.
So this one was actually a worldwide release. It was because of the cask size, we did offer it to a lot of our markets around the world, not just the ones in the Americas. So it is one that you've got in France, the UK, and a few other places as well.
Nice. And this is also another one that we only got one case of here in BC. It was meant to be released at the Victoria Whisky Festival. So we do have the exclusive here at the Strath. There are only now 5 bottles left for the entire province. It smells like smoked leather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me, it's that toffee and that fruitcake. So again, that kind of sweetness, that richness, and then that smokiness is just there. Just gives it that really kind of additional flavor.
It is really, it's deep. It's a little tiny bit, like a very, very small amount of iodine on the nose as well. It smells like an old ship.
See, we refer to this as quite a young whiskey because it's from the 2000s, but it's still a 19-year-old whiskey. I mean, yeah. Sometimes we have to look at what we release and go, that's quite 19 years is still a very old whiskey. It's just not as old as what we can do.
And here in British Columbia, this whiskey is old enough to drink itself legally.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
orange coming through. It's just smoky, fruity. Yeah, really nice whiskey.
Yeah, the on the palate, I'm getting big hits of like blood orange and black currants and sort of these more deeper, richer fruits. Oh, yes. Mm. That is really, really good. Yeah, it's a shame. So there are people going to be obviously tasting these bottles, but it's not at a Dram Association like official tasting, in-person tasting. So this won't be getting the scorecards that they get there. So this won't be included in our sort of big chart of reviews. But yeah, I think if it was, it would be definitely top 3 or 4, knowing the flavor profile that is loved by our members.
Yeah, I mean, we see the demand for the Chig. It's been a habit coming through in Canada from. It's definitely a market where it seems to be quite an active following for those distilleries.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it here in BC is that it's so hard to find. It's so hard to get. Like especially in the last couple of years with all of the shipping delays and everything, even the one official bottling that we can get of Lechaig, the Lechaig 10, has been very hit and miss. We get it like every 6 months or something. So when something really special from that distillery comes up, it's really popular just because we don't see it very often.
Yeah, I mean, this is where Gordon MacPhail and there being one-off bottlings, it's kind of okay to drop in and drop out because somebody else will replace it.
Mm-hmm.
And then trying to keep continuity of stock has been challenging with 6 months shipping time to get from the UK to Canada or to the West anyway. Mm-hmm. It's harder to keep everything in stock all the time.
Yeah. And actually, a huge shout out and thanks to James for all the work he's done to get these whiskies to us. It's 6 months is actually a very low estimate, I think, right now. I think, if I remember correctly, I think James put the order for these in like April or something of last year.
I mean, we're looking at shipping this year's kind of end of year stock now. So, I mean, it's trying to get ahead of it this year.
Yeah. I very much look forward to seeing what's on the next shipment. Because, yeah, I mean, this is the first time where we've really had a full like suite of amazing things all come at once from Gordon MacPhail here in BC for us. We've had, obviously we've had shipments and we've had lots of different distillery bottlings and things, but there's been a real push on the connoisseur's choice this time. And I don't think we've ever just pre-ordered and got 8 or more Gordon MacPhails at once from a shipment. And it's really exciting. And I hope that this happens more often. Honestly, I feel like this could happen every 2 or 3 months and the market would be satisfied here with that. But I understand there's probably not enough whiskey to do that.
Yeah, Canada is one of our markets we're kind of focusing on, and I'm focusing on myself. And we want to try and get as much product to the market as there's demand for. Mm-hmm. Conscious choice itself, though, I think it really fits what Gordon MacPhail was really about. A depth and range of whiskey, having lots of different offerings, all being unique, and it's just a really nice kind of sweet spot for our portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Well, I honestly don't know if there's much more I need to say about this Lechaig other than you guys should buy it. This is pretty much exactly what I was expecting, given what I know about the distillery, what I know about Gordon and MacPhail, and from the information on the bottle. There's nothing wild and crazy about this. It is exactly what you'd expect from I guess the wild crazy thing is knowing that this is a second fill sherry, but not a refill. If you didn't have that piece of information, you might be a bit blown away by quite how much flavor there is from the oak. But yeah, this is very, very good, as I expected.
Yeah,
and it is available. $278.17 is the standard price, which means with the discount, it's $250.35, and that is available right now exclusively at the Strath here in BC at strathliquor.com.
I might need to ask you to keep me a bottle when I come over.
If you actually need that, I can sort you out. You've done plenty for us. I'm sure we can reciprocate. Oh yeah. All right. That is a stunning introduction to the more coastal style, and we're now about to go to a pair from the same distillery, which I'm very much looking forward to because it's potentially my favorite of the peated Islers, just purely for consistency's sake. I've never had a subpar Caol Ila. They've always met a certain level of quality and expectation. And for me, that's the same kind of idea as Gordon MacPhail. So when you put those two things together, I think this is going to be fabulous. And we're going back, as was teased earlier, to the new Discovery range for a 13-year-old Caol Ila, which from the tasting notes on the bottle, I'm going to be very pleasantly surprised with the tropical fruit notes.
So this release is matured in ex-bourbon casks, so you can get citrus that you can taste there, but you can get that smokiness coming through, that medicinal, smoky bacon. It's just going to be exactly what you expect from a Caol Ila. Nice. Very nice, balanced, smoky whiskey. And yeah, part of the Discovery range. So with the Discovery range, the ages change, but we look to get the pricing should be about the same for all the releases. So you get an extra 2 years compared to the Glenrothes in this one, but it's all about the flavor profile.
And absolutely, the price is exactly the same. So we do already have this available, so you don't have to wait for the big red button. You can jump across to strathliquor.com right now and pick yourself up a bottle. Regular price $110.35, which means with the 10% discount, $99.32. $99 for a 13-year-old Caol Ila is the reason why I've sold through about 4 cases of this already in the last few weeks. And we haven't even tasted it yet. I actually have a feeling that I should probably see if there's any more in the warehouse and stock up before this video comes out.
Then we've got some more in the water as well. So
perfect. I think we have 8 bottles on the shelf right now, and that's definitely not going to be enough.
I think it's the nice thing with Discovery is it is consistent. It does give a core offering that you can have on shelf most of the time. Yeah. And then with these single cask bottlings, which give just that one-off element to it. Those unique, I use unique too many times, but they are unique. That's the challenge. That these single casks are one-off bottlings.
And honestly, I have one big problem though with this series of whiskey. From a store perspective, like I said earlier, we have our independently bottled whiskies in their own special place. They're in a cabinet, so that we keep all the indie stuff together. But this is so well priced that I don't know where to put it. Do I put it with the other whiskeys so that the people who are shopping in that price range see it, or do I put it with the special whiskeys because it's still special? Like it's hard to place. Maybe I should just put it both.
So we're looking to, with this range, it's a £50 retail in the UK.
Oh,
and we try and do the pricing these days that allows everyone to get to nearly the same price point in key markets. So because everyone always looks at a UK online retailer and to see what the price is of whiskey. So we've put a lot of work in recent years to try and make the pricing fair so everyone can make margin and everyone can get the right retail price point. Yeah. That's just because we wanted to make sure people buy in market, people get the right value. Consumers aren't necessarily penalized for where they are in the world. It's about getting access to our portfolio.
Mm-hmm. And that has worked incredibly well so far because you're using the same idea for Benromach. I have a feeling that it will prove to be equally as effective for the Discovery series because we've already had so much positive feedback from these guys. I love the color on this. It's very, very white wine-esque. Especially with the label that lets you see the color so much, it feels like I'm about to have a Sauvignon Blanc or something. Oh, yes. Yeah, this is, I feel the perfect way to introduce people to this style of coastal peated whiskey. That is on the nose, so incredibly inviting. Yeah. Tropical fruit notes. I read on the label, and it's definitely stuck in my head, kiwi, which is something that I don't know that I find very often in whiskey. And when I do, I very much enjoy it. It feels somewhat cheeky. That definitely has that sort of nice acidic tropical fruit nose there, but it's mixed with this beautiful salty coastal maritime note.
Yeah, I mean, the smokiness is there, but I never find clearly like the smokiest whiskey in the world. It's just a nice level.
It's prominent, but not overpowering, I think.
Yeah, but you do get that medicinal note more than you obviously from the Ardmore that we tried earlier. Mm-hmm. But again, I just find it a nice level for my own palate.
Absolutely. I think is it 45 ppm, I think they peak to, which I think really shows how much like the ppm of the barley is just one part of the story. It's what you do to it through distillation and maturation that's going to affect that whole massively, because it's literally like exactly the same ppm. And actually they both get it from Port Ellen malting. So this is exactly the same ppm ingredients as like the Lagavulin 8-year-old or something, right? But it's a very, very different drinking experience. Oh, it's clean. It's lemony. Yeah. It's a very fresh smoke.
Yeah, it's kind of like walking outside in a nice cold day. It just feels that clean, crisp element to it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the first blue sky day of like mid to late spring. And you're walking around. It actually reminds me very strangely of a trip I went on with the Folk Music Society of the University of Edinburgh, where we went to Inverurie, and they've got that big sort of lake there right at the city, in the town. Definitely not a city. Then you can just go sit on the pier and look at the mountains, and there's that little lake there. It feels like that same sort of early morning crisp freshness. You know, there was a bit of a sprinkling of frost overnight, but it's starting to thaw out.
What I love about whiskey is the nose, just taking time to actually see how the flavor develops and different aromas. Every whiskey is different, and you can just explore it and take your time. Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so if you guys at home are needing a bottle to serve as an introduction to peat for your friends, this is a fantastic choice. And I think like I want to say that this is a great thing for, you know, whiskey enthusiasts to have up their sleeve as a suggestion for people, but also for yourself. Like, even if you're the kind of whiskey drinker that, you know, normally drinks full on single cask strength stuff and generally buys things that are 3 or 4 times the price of this is still an absolutely fantastic whiskey. And just because it's on the more introductory level pricing range for single malts, don't pass it by. Don't just dismiss it. This is an incredible whiskey. I've had, you know, thousands of whiskeys in the last few years, and this is still absolutely fantastic.
With every whiskey we release, though, it goes through the same quality checks for any of our releases, no matter the price point. Mm-hmm. So for us, the quality of everything we release should be the same. It's just that flavor profile will evolve depending on the age and the maturation and the expression.
Yeah.
When we grade whiskies, we grade them out of 10. And my brother and his team, they grade them, but I think they're too harsh. They never give it anything a 10. I think the record so far has been a 9. And a bit of a joke around that what's this? He's like, and I guess when I challenge my brother on this one, he's always saying, well, 5 is a good whiskey, but 5 can almost makes you think 50% rather than actually being, but for him, he's like, a 5 is good. We try and release 7s, and the very special ones we do are 9s. And he's hoping maybe on his last day at work in a couple of decades' times, he might actually release a 10. Going, that's it. I found the best whiskey in our portfolio, and there you go. And then, then walk out of the business, and that'll be his last day at work.
See, this is what you got to remember, though, is that the quality of whiskey that's being produced by the people that you work with in terms of the distillation, and the quality, of course, that you guys are putting into the wood program means that realistically, it's not actually a 1 to 10 scale that they're working on. There's actually a 9 and a point before that. So it's actually, a 5 is actually a 9.5.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. So we've already done a side-by-side comparison of 2 Ardmores, one from the distillery labels and one from the Connoisseur's Choice. And we're going to do the same thing now at Caol Ila with the Discovery Caol Ila. And we're now moving on to, again, a Connoisseur's Choice Caol Ila, which is very exciting and quite different, I believe, to the Discovery. Because this one is, yes, it is a sherry butt once again. So they've actually kind of gone backwards from the Ardmores, where the distillery label Ardmore was sherry and then the Connoisseur's Choice was bourbon. This time we've started with a bourbon and going to a sherry.
Yeah. But looking at one of the tasting notes here, I'm nosing it as well. I'm a little bit ahead of you in this one. Honeycomb, you get that straight in the nose when this is in a glass.
Honeycomb, nice. Cured so meat as the first note is always very... very exciting. I love the bacony Caol Ilas.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was, again, from February 2021. Again, a sherry book, so 611 bottles. This was the 38th batch of 2021. Cask strength at 59.7. 13 years aged. Oh, interesting. So actually exactly the same age.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So we're seeing 2 whiskies from the same distillery matured at the same place, I assume, from, by the same people. One from bourbon cask that has been released at 43%, and one from a refill sherry cask that's released at cask strength. What an interesting comparison. All right. Lovely. Yes. Yes, indeed. That smells like candied bacon. Brown sugar.
Caol Ila is great. It works well with bourbon casks. It works well with sherry casks. And you can get very different flavor profiles as a result.
And I honestly find that I've had a few older Caol Ilas. I prefer it younger. I think around this sort of age, anywhere between 8 and 15, I think is where Caol Ila really shines for me.
So the oldest Caol Ila we released has been in 1968, 50-year-old.
Oh, wow.
That one was pretty special, I have to say. That was from the old Caol Ila distillery before it was rebuilt, I think in 1969. So it was our last cask in the 1960s. Amazing. So it is one we've started to mature for a longer length of time. But you're right, it works well at a young age, it works well at different age profiles and different maturations. So it's a really good spirit to work with.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what you're looking for in a Caol Ila. For me, a Caol Ila is just not the same unless it has that meaty, citrusy peat note. And that obviously dissipates when it's older. But also, like, I've had a few unpeated Caol Ilas, and when I said before that Caol Ila for me is very consistent, and I've loved every Caol Ila I've had. I should have said peated Caol Ila, because I have had a few of their bottlings from their unpeated stuff that they do, and it's not bad. It's just not the same. I feel like it neuters it somewhat. Lingering bonfire embers. I've never eaten a bonfire ember, but definitely smelled a few.
Yeah, I love that richness. For me, I was going to say maple syrup. I mean, it's got that kind of the kind of sweet treacle influence coming through there.
And smoked maple, absolutely, yeah. That's a good call. It does remind me of Guy Fawkes Night a little. You got the toffee apples, you've got the bonfire toffee, you've got the smoke, you've got the embers. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is a glorious example of a very, very well-matured Caol Ila in a sherry cask. And I'm sure it's the same in the UK, but here in the market in BC, if you've got an Islay whiskey from an independent bottler, 7 out of 8 times probably it's going to be a Caol Ila. We get an awful lot of it over here, which is not a bad thing. Like I said, I love Caol Ila, but this is definitely a standout.
Yeah, I mean, it's if we look at our portfolio, it is heavily weighted towards Speyside, but we are a Speyside business. We have filled obviously many different Islay whiskies over the years, but is there, as with the way the industry is right now, is more challenging to fill all distilleries. So Caol Ila, a big part of our kind of representation from Islay.
I'm very intrigued by the fact, of course, it makes sense that, being based in Speyside, you're going to be having a more Speyside-centric portfolio. But so far in this tasting, we've had 7 whiskies, and only the first one's been a Speyside.
Yeah, very good point.
This is must be quite a strange one for you.
So when we look back to where the portfolio started 100 years ago, 125 years ago plus, it was predominantly Speyside. It was Macallan, Glenlivet, Mortlake, Linkwood, all the distilleries very local to where we're based. In fact, above our shop in Elgin, there was a lot of independent offices which were rented by distilleries. They had their town office for banking in our building. And all this kind of links together to how we managed to create relationships and start filling with different distilleries all the way back then. So there's a lot of history in Gordon MacPhail and in the industry, obviously. And it's nice how lots of stories kind of connect at different points in that journey.
Now, I feel like I may have cheekily asked this when we were talking about Benromach, but maybe I haven't. Has Gordon MacPhail thought about bottling malt whiskey from outside of Scotland?
We have discussed it as an idea. It's not something we've actually done or plan to do anytime soon. But of course, as discussions come up, right now, Gordon MacPhail is very much focused on single malt from Scotland. That's what Gordon MacPhail is known for. That's very much what we're focusing on right now.
Yeah.
The interesting change for us will be around the increased distillery capacity by having the cairn come on stream this year. Cool. And that's been a project that's probably taken about 5 years to get to where we are now, and maybe a bit longer. And that has been, that's a very exciting time for us. So for us, it's still going to be Scottish single malt, but having another distillery in our portfolio is very exciting.
Nice. And we were talking about the cairn a little bit last time when we talked Benromach, and plans are still working. There's been no spanners thrown in the works.
We're running a few months behind due to some challenges with commissioning and supply chain challenges, but it's only by a few months. I mean, the stills we're in, it's watertight, it's going through the commissioning. It should be doing the first run of spirit in the next weeks or months. It's not far away from being finished now. So that's, looking forward to seeing that first spirit run off the stills, and then looking forward to 12 years down the road and having some whiskey to go and sell.
So one of the questions I meant to ask actually last time we chatted, and I'll bring it up now, especially with the cairn, is maturation side. Do you mature all of your own distillery stuff alongside the sourced whiskies, or do you have separate maturation sites currently for Benromach and Gordon MacPhail?
So we've got maturation at Benelux itself, and we've got I think we're up to 7 warehouses there, and we'll maybe build another 2 more on our site there.
Cool.
We have our old warehousing in Elgin, and we have a mixture of casks in Forest, which is Gordon MacPhail and Benelux. We have G&M casks out on site at distilleries throughout Scotland, and then we have casks back in Elgin as well. And we have some Benelux casks in Elgin, which are due to be bottled in the next 12 months. So we tend to move it back a while before we're due to bottle it. Just
interesting. So despite using your own casks, you will sometimes actually mature whiskies at the distillery.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as easy as it used to be on that side, because lots of companies now have centralized warehousing, but all possible, we will try and mature on site at that distillery. So if it's distilled in Islay, we'll try and mature on Islay until about 12 months before we due to bottle it, and then bring it back to Elgin.
Nice. Do you just have a guy in a truck going around Scotland picking up all your stray casks? Or?
No, it's the same company that most distilleries use.
Nice.
Around a new cask for us. So we are a small producer compared to the big companies that are moving thousands and thousands of casks, on a much more regular basis. Mm-hmm. So for us, it's just we don't have enough capacity to sort our casks ourselves, but there's also that element of letting whiskies mature at the home of that distillery as well, as where we're probably destined to be matured.
And speaking of transportation of casks, one of the main reasons, I guess, that Speyside became such a prominent whiskey region is the railways. Is that still used at all, or is it all cargo trucks these days?
Yeah, just trucks, I believe. Yeah.
Cool.
I remember one of my first days at Gordon MacPhail, working in our cask warehouse and watching some casks get unloaded and just rolled off the back of a lorry onto a sponge. And I remember going, oh my God, it's going to smash. But they're built so well that they just kind of bounce, then roll off. I was like, how does that survive that? I mean, because a cask is a heavy bit of, it's a heavy item. I mean, it's about 600 kilograms for a sherry butt. Yeah. And just rolls off and bounces and then rolls in. Obviously, health and safety rules are followed and everyone's cordoned off and it's all done properly. But yeah, I just remember I was surprised how to unload how to unload a truck of casks.
I can't remember where I was now. It was one of the Canadian distillers, I feel. They were talking about, in their mind, the best way to unload a lorry full of casks is the IKEA mattress. That is the perfect landing spot.
We have this big sponge thing that it just lands on and absorbs all the impact.
Amazing. Well, if you are interested in picking up a bottle of this Kalila 2007 from a sherry cask, there are 5 available exclusively at the Strath here in BC. Regular price $191.91, which means the sale price with 10% off for all members right now is $172.72. I like how that works out. 91.91, 72.72. That's fun. And with that, I am going to take a decent sized sip from my water glass because it's time to reset the palate somewhat for the finale. So there is one whiskey which we got quite some time ago now that we were waiting for the rest of the Gordon MacPhail products to arrive so we could showcase them all together. That I'm very excited to try, and I know that there's some people at my work who are very excited for it to be released, and that's the accountants, because it's just been sat in a cupboard for a while. I am very, very happy to have you joining me for this digitally. We're about to have the oldest whiskey we've ever had on this YouTube channel, and actually we've ever had on in the Dram Association at all ever. This is very, very special. And we are going to yet another one of Gordon MacPhail's pillars of their scotches, their different series of releases. This is an archive release, exclusive single malt Scotch whiskey from Linkwood Distillery. And if I show you this bottle, it's very pared back. It's very unassuming. It's very classic in its presentation. It's almost very sort of sort of tuxedo-esque in a sense. It's not trying to be different. It's not trying to be wild. There's no sequins on it. It's not flashy. It's not in a giant wooden box. But if you look at the little date at the bottom, it will tell you that it was bottled in 2018 and it was distilled in 1967, which is quite a long time ago. 1967. So this was actually distilled, I guess now, 55 years ago. It's horrifying. I feel like I shouldn't be allowed to open this.
So this is a range that we came out with at the start of COVID. We used to use these labels for single casks many years ago, but with supply chain issues, we had whiskey that was due for release, and we just couldn't get the packaging we normally have for that. So we decided to come out with the archive release as a way of allowing us to release the whiskies we had planned, but we had the packaging ready to do that. And it just meant we could come out with something a little bit more traditional to old Gordon MacPhail style, a little bit more about the liquid rather than the packaging, but still offer greatly aged single malts, single casks. Some of these were quite small outturn casks as well. So again, it was just the range was a situation that, as in we couldn't bottle it out in our own way, and we still wanted to release the whiskies to the market. And we got to go back to how we maybe used to release whiskies pre-2018.
Nice. And I have to say, I really, really like the understated labeling on this. I think it adds to it a little bit. It's got a bit of a shock value in a sense. If you've got this like magnificently presented, like with a crazy, crazy decanter style crystal cut bottle in a big wooden case, it kind of, it's going to be a special whiskey. With something like this, you see the bottle and like, oh, and then you look at the bottle again, and like, hang on, that shouldn't be that dark. Hang on, that says 1967. It feels like you're discovering it a little bit, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and the quality of the liquids would have gone into our private collection. They would have gone into one of our more modern ranges. So this is really a way of that. Understated is a great way to put it. The same liquid, the same quality, but you get it's a unique way of releasing it. That was
Yeah, and do you think that this is going to be a continuing thing, or was this a temporary measure?
It was a temporary measure, but that being said, we did do a 1967 as well, Glenburgie for Canada as well. That's not been released yet. That's on its way over. So again, that was a discussion we had with James and the authentic team about. They were keen that we did another release, so we found a cask, met the brief. That's the nice thing about what we have is like, you want a 50-year-old cask, sure. How many do you want? Almost is we've got a very privileged position that we have quite a lot of aging whiskies from many different distilleries, so we can go and find a cask that meets the requirements.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think the other super old whiskey that I've had on this channel was a very special edition Gordon MacPhail that looked relatively similar to this, actually. That was, I believe, the first single cask that Andrew Ferguson ever brought in from you guys, which was really cool as well. I think that was a Glen Grant from the 60s.
Yeah, so I think that was under it was a previous, same type of label, but just a previous version of that. Mm-hmm. That's going back,
Yeah, it's a while ago now. All right. So speaking of the release, it says on the back here that number of bottles 29.
Yeah.
Is that purely from evaporation?
Yeah. So this was a first fill sherry hogshead. It had slightly higher losses than we normally expect. The strength was still 42%. It met all our quality criteria. And it was just a low outturn cask.
Wow. Well, I have to say, if you got any more low outturn casks of this kind of number, maybe this is what we should release for our 20th anniversary next year, because I think we might be able to spring for 29.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the great thing about whiskey and casks. Every cask is unique. Said that word again too many times, but you have casks which will give you 500 bottles. You have casks that will give you 200. And there are some casks which are still great casks, which will give you a slightly lower outturn.
Yeah. The amazing thing here is that it was distilled on the 23rd of February, 1967, and it was then bottled on the 26th of January, 2018. Had you managed to wait another month, it would have been 51 years old.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't necessarily about trying to make it a certain age. It's when we felt it was the right time to bottle it after waiting it.
And that, that really stands as a testament to what you guys are all about. But it also makes a lot of sense from the fact that it doesn't say the age anywhere on it. You have to do math to find out what the age is.
Yeah.
The age is not the important thing here. It's the style of whiskey that is the important thing here. And I feel like that is the story that you're trying to put out with this bottling. So Linkwood is an absolutely incredible distillery. We've had many fabulous Linkwoods from all variety of different places here in BC. I actually know at least two people who have said that Linkwood is their favorite distillery, despite the fact that we very, very rarely see it as a Linkwood. Like, we'll see it by independent bottlers, but we don't see official bottlings on the shop. It has very little. There's no advertising budget for Linkwood here in BC. If you're not really, really into whiskey, you probably don't know it exists. But for the kind of people who are watching a whiskey YouTube show, you've probably heard of Linkwood. And if you have, you know the reputation that Linkwood has as being one of the absolute primo distilleries from Speyside, especially for longer aging and also for blending as well.
And if you love Linkwood, there's another whiskey on our portfolio I suggest trying at some point. Is our 25-year-old distillery label, which is one of my favorite whiskeys of all time. It's first fill and refill sherry, but dark, rich, elegant. The thing with Linkwood is you get that zesty orange, you get that element of fruitiness that's just a little bit different. It's quite like orange peel, and you can taste that in all the releases. And then you get that dried fruits from the sherry cask, that European oak comes through, and you get this amazing drinking whiskey. And a 25-year-old, again, not the youngest whiskey, but not the oldest whiskey, and it's just a really nice drinking whiskey.
It's half the age of this one.
I mean, 50 years ago or 55 years ago with this whiskey, it's amazing to think that we're drinking product that is being sitting around in a warehouse, maturing slowly, evolving over time, and then getting released. Just now, I mean, it was well before I was born. I'm guessing for yourself.
I always enjoy having the whiskeys that are sort of around when I was born. It's kind of fun. And then you have a whiskey like this, which when this was distilled, my mum was 8.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
When this was distilled, it was my grandfather and my oldest uncle was in the business. My dad wasn't back in yet. He joined in 1972. So the business was very different back then. We were still very much a fruit and veg grocer, a wine and spirit merchant that had our own whiskey bottlings and sherry bottlings and other types of bottlings coming through there as well. Mm-hmm. The business evolved since then. So it's for me, it's always nice to go back in time and think about how the business was and the family was at that particular time and see how it's changed over that 50 years.
Nice. And Linkwood is one of the distilleries, as you mentioned, that you have distillery labels for. So I didn't realize you had a 25-year-old. I'm really intrigued to try that now. But you do have, I want to say 15, is it? The teenage one that you have?
Yeah. So we do, our 2 core releases for distillery labels are Linkwood 15, Linkwood 25-year-old, Mortlach 15 and Mortlach 25-year-old.
Nice.
Again, we run out of stock every year because the demand's quite high on these releases, but some is available to Canada. And these ones are just consistent releases that we do every year. And they are just really nice, consistent drinking whiskies. The 25-year-old Linkwood is just my personal favorite. Yeah. When my daughter was born in February last year, it was the whiskey I bought to celebrate her coming into the world. The times have changed with whiskey. When my first son was born, he's just turned 6. We used to do a Glen Grant 50-year-old, very reasonable price back then. So that was my whiskey for that point. So times have changed and the age a little bit, but for me, it's just a really nice whiskey, elegant, fruity, that little bit of zesty orange, which you get in this whiskey as well. And it's just very much that, even at that age of 50 years old, you still get that DNA of Linkwood Distillery. It's not there's obviously the cask influence is there, but you still get to taste that distillery character as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I guess without any further ado, I should, terrifying as it is, open this bottle. All right, big moment. Oh, lovely. Perfectly intact cork. Always good to see in these older bottlings. I've been fishing too many times. That is straight up the color of balsamic vinegar. That is amazing. Okay. That is... I'm putting the cork straight back on top, so if I do knock it over by accident, I don't ruin everything. Also, so it doesn't just evaporate out the bottle. This is, this is incredible on the nose. I think powered mostly from the fact that it is cask strength at 42.4. So as we said earlier, the whole, I think we said this with the Bunnahabhain, the whole idea of having cask strength whiskey that is lower ABV just means that you're getting so much more concentrated flavor. You're getting none of the burn. Like it's not the same as having a 42% whiskey from the shelf that has been reduced to 42. It's a completely different beast. You're not getting any reduction in flavor at all. You're just getting full concentrated flavors with like little to no alcohol burn at all. And that nose is so interesting. It is thick. It like aromas don't usually have texture.
But it's not this viscosity you get with some of the really older whiskies. I mean, this whiskey would never have made it to 70 years old. No. Obviously, volume and strength would play a part there, but the cask would overpower as it got even older and older. So that's why this whiskey at 50 years old is the right time to bottle it, rather than hold off to make it a 51-year-old or a 55-year-old.
It smells like the collective wisdom of like a library in a sense. It smells prestigious, and it smells old, and it smells wise. And I don't quite understand how and why that is the case. But it feels like this whiskey knows more than I do.
I always wonder with some of these old whiskies that we enjoy today, in 50 years' time, will whiskey taste the same as they did back in the 60s, back in the 50s, back in the 40s? Because back then we were using casks which weren't seasoned, they were expediter casks. Distilleries would have been direct fired rather than actually using more modern ways of heating their stills. Spirit profiles would be different, they'd have been oilier and heavier. So it'd be interesting to see how whiskey evolves in the next 50 years to see if these whiskies will still be as intense and elegant and the depth of flavor.
That's one of the things that I usually find it very exciting in tastings when we have older Ardmores, like pre 2003 or whatever it was when they changed to direct fired, because it's like, this is the only distillery in the only whiskey in the tasting which is coal fired. This is almost definitely coal fired though, right? Like they wouldn't. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. As I was meaning, back in those days, you'd have had coal-fired, you'd have had, everything would have been a different, same ingredients, but it'd been a very manual process compared to automated and more modern technologies used to run distilleries today.
Yeah. And one question about the ABV of the whiskies. Have you ever had it where you've accidentally had a cask drop below 40? If that has happened, what do you do with it at that point?
So if we do our jobs correctly, we should be aware of that potential risk, and we have a watch list as well for casks that reach that. But I'm sure over time there has been casks that have dipped below. What we used to do under our rare vintage range which is our distillery labels, but vintages that were over 30 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They could be 1 or 2 casks or 3 casks. So you could actually take casks of the same vintage and put them together to get the ABV to come back up. But for us, that's not something that we want to do on a regular basis. So for us, it's very much making sure we know our casks and we watch them, and we bottle them if there's any risks.
Yeah, remain vigilant at all times. I like it. And that's because there's also a bit of a risk of evaporation and ABV loss during the bottling process, right? So do you have to, is there an ABV that you aim for just to be safe? Like, would this have been like 43 or 44 in the cask or something?
Yeah, our team would be very much looking at, to be aware of what we'd lose in a typical bottling. Mm-hmm. Certain casks we have, people in a warehouse, they'll be in bunds, not actually just in a rack, in case something happened to the cask. The liquid is so scarce and valuable that we need to make sure we take every precaution to protect it. And we can always put it into glass and bottle it. But as with this one, bottled in 2018, we don't need to release it the year we bottle it. We can release it when we choose to release it. So it's
once it's in an inert container, it's a time capsule.
Yeah.
Has Gordon MacPhail kept older bottlings that were bottled, 30, 40 years ago as for reference points?
We've got a library of cask samples, and we've got a library of bottles of every release that we've done for control purposes. And yeah, there is liquid in bottle from a number of years ago that hasn't been used yet. And maybe that's when over time we'll find a way to release that to the market and do different things with it. So the family motto is always very much don't throw anything away, it may come in handy one day. Mm-hmm. And it's actually quite useful when it comes to Scotch whisky and having a warehouse full of casks. And having a library full of samples that we can go back and see how the industry has changed. We talked about this with Benoit, about how we could go back and see how Speyside changed decade by decade. We can go and see how distillery character has changed. So we can go and see, how did liquid taste in the 1940s, 1930s? How does liquid taste in the 2000s? Our maturation profile can change to evolve as that spirit style changes over time.
Nice. Well, I'm going to go in and finally have a sip of this beast of a whiskey. But one nosing note before I do, it smells like the best Chinotto that has ever been made. It's the bitter orange and the aromatic herbs. Oh, wow. That is a crazy experience. Like the effect that this whiskey has on the mouth is like nothing I have ever had before. It like evaporates anything that was there before. It just kind of, it's like a little bomb of flavor that then sort of leaves this drying effect. That is cool. That is quite tannic.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. Cloves, bitter orange, tannins, and it's robust. It's a palate that is it doesn't disappear. You can definitely taste that whiskey for quite a long time afterwards. Bit of licorice. It's I mean, for a 50-year whiskey, it's going to have a lot of that kind of oakiness in terms of, in a pleasant way, coming through. Yeah. But I'll go back to that kind of zesty orange, but younger liquids. You can still taste that in this whiskey. You still get that DNA coming through.
So I'm going to be honest here. I would describe this as not an easy whiskey. This is not something that I would want to sit and drink 3 ounces of on a summer's afternoon on a swing bench on a porch somewhere in Mississippi. This is the kind of whiskey where I don't think I would want more than half an ounce of this at a time, which is great because you want it to last, right, for this kind of whiskey. This is very much a thinker's whiskey. This is a philosophical whiskey. This is the kind of thing that you want to sit by a fire, maybe with some friends, maybe on your own, and just enjoy in small amounts and unlock the flavors that are there. I wouldn't say in a classic sense that this is drinkable. This is not like gluggable in any way, but this is an incredibly enjoyable experience.
But it's an experience, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can't go back in time and make more whiskey from 1967. The whiskey that we have from there is the whiskey we have from there, and older. So you're getting to try something that is from a different period of time than it is today.
Yeah, and it almost in the most respectful way, it almost doesn't taste like whiskey, in a sense. I mean, it does. It definitely tastes like whiskey. It's still got the whiskey, even the linkwood sort of profile hidden beneath it. But there's so much depth and complexity going on. It feels like something must have happened to this. Like it's not just a product of oak and thyme. That there must have been some kind of crazy cocktail mixologist going on into creating the flavors that are happening here.
With some of these whiskies which are 50 plus years old in sherry casks, you just do get that different flavor coming through.
Yeah.
Some of the older whiskies that we have, they're actually in transport casks. And I think we might have covered them last time a little bit as well. These are older casks which were made thicker. So that's why you get some of our 80-year-old liquid is actually lighter than the 50-year-old because it's American oak. It was a thicker cask, so you got a lower and slower evaporation and maturation.
Yeah, of course, it's harder for the oxygen to get in and out.
Yeah, and they retain loss of volume and their strength. This is a sherry cask. It's a hogshead, so a small cask. Hogsheads typically don't last 50 years because the smaller cask, the faster maturation. So there's a lot happening in that cask over 50 years. It's going to all add different flavors and just different layers. I always think of whiskey like an onion. Each layer you peel back, there's different layers under there. This is going to be a very concentrated experience because it's a smaller cask. It's 50 years old. It's European oak. It's an egg sherry cask. And you're just going to get lots of layers coming through there. And over time, it will just soften and soften as it's in your glass. As the temperature changes, or if you add a touch of water, it will just, the experience will just evolve.
Nice. Yeah. It tastes strangely Italian. And I can't quite put my finger on what that means or why I feel that. But yeah, I feel like this is weirdly Italian in flavor profile.
But maybe it's that slightly herbal element coming through there. There's dryness as well.
What this whiskey does, which is very rare for a whiskey, is it makes me hungry. It makes me want to eat something after I've had a sip. I feel like it's begging me to just go to the fridge and get some cheese or something. So I have a tiny amount left in the glass, and I'm not going to pour myself any more because this is precious, precious liquid. But I'm going to do something purely for science. I'm going to see what happens if I add a little bit of water into it, just to see what. Oh my good God! I don't think the camera is going to pick this up. Being on Zoom, it's not as high def as when we're not. But I add a little tiny drop of water, and you can see it's like a ring of oils dissipating, coming out from the drip. That's incredible. That's so thick. Wow. That is absolutely one of the coolest looking things. I've said this before about adding water to particularly thick and viscous whiskeys. This, like, you can see it change the color as the drip sort of expands through the whiskey. That is really interesting.
I mean, this whiskey is really thick. I mean, it's almost chewy in terms of when you try and drink it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, chewy. Chewy is a weirdly good description of the flavor of this whiskey. Yeah, it's like whiskey jerky.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What a special experience this is. Oh, well, as mind-blowing as this is, we have 6 bottles available. These are the only 6 bottles in the province. And as I promised, anything that gets put out on these videos for Dram Association members will get the 10% discount. So we're actually going to give you a 10% discount on this ridiculous 50-year-old linkwood. So the regular price for this whiskey is $4,956.43, which means with your 10% discount, you can save almost $500. You can get it for $4,460.79. That is for a strictly limited period, because I know for an absolute certainty that this whiskey will sell at full price. I don't need to discount it, but I'm doing so because I like you. So yeah, if you are interested in this liquid, it is available at strathliquor.com right now. I just realized I'm not entirely sure I feel comfortable putting this in the post, so I might mark this as in-store pickup only, but if you do need it couriered to you or something within BC, I'm sure we can figure something like that out. I might even hand deliver it for the right price. But yes, it is available right now. 50-year-old liquid. Blimey. And thank you very, very much for joining us. I'll let you enjoy your weekend now, Richard. It's been wonderful of you to join us for the last couple of hours of your week. Although I'm sure being the man you are, you've probably got some work to do over the weekend.
Yeah, that's just the way work is these days. But, thank you so much for having me back on your show again. It's always great to catch up and talk about our whiskies and our company and our brand. So thank you so much for giving me the time to come and talk to you and your whiskey club and everyone. So Slange, thank you.
Slange about. Good night, and we'll see you soon when you visit in person.
Yeah, looking forward to it, and I will definitely let you know so we can go and have that dram.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you next time.